She sat at the head of the table, radiating confidence, convinced she had everything under control. Then the name was announced. Derrick Coleman. For a split second, silence filled the room. Then he stood up, calmly adjusting his suit, a slow, knowing smirk spreading across his face. "Thank you," he said smoothly. "But before we vote, let's talk about justice." A chill ran down Karen's spine. Something was very, very wrong. But what happened next? It shattered her entire world. But let's start from the beginning. The sun was barely up in Oak Ridge Estates, but Karen Whitmore was already on the prowl. Clad in her pastel cardigan and a pearl necklace, she strutted through the neighborhood like she owned the place, because in her mind, she practically did. She'd been the president of the HOA for 5 years, and as far as she was concerned, rules weren't just rules. They were her commandments. That's when she saw him. A tall black man in a sleek suit, casually walking toward the newly renovated house on Maple Lane. Derrick Coleman. She'd heard the name before, but he was just another homeowner, another outsider who thought he could move in without playing by her rules. Her lip curled as she spotted something. A potted plant sitting on the porch that was not on the HOA's approved list. Karen didn't hesitate. She marched up the driveway with her clipboard in hand, eyes narrowing. "Excuse me, sir?" she called out, already preparing her best condescending but firm voice. Derrick turned, adjusting the cuff of his sleeve. "Yes?" Karen let out a sharp breath. Not even a good morning. How typical. She plastered on a fake smile. "You must be new here. I'm Karen Whitmore, the HOA president," she said, stretching out the title as if she were royalty. "And I'm afraid you're already violating multiple guidelines." Derrick raised an eyebrow. "Am I?" Karen tapped her clipboard with dramatic flair. "First, that plant. We don't allow non-standard potted plants. Then there's your mailbox, wrong shade of black. And I noticed your car parked slightly over the line in your driveway. That's an infraction. HOA fines are $250 per violation." Derrick exhaled sharply through his nose, crossing his arms. "Are you serious?" Karen's fake smile widened. "Dead serious. We run a tight ship here, Mr. Coleman. We expect everyone to follow the rules." Derrick nodded slowly. "Right. So, you're fining me for a plant, a mailbox, and how I parked in my own driveway?" Karen tilted her head. "I understand this might be different from where you're used to living, but here in Oak Ridge, we have standards to uphold." Derrick's jaw tensed. He could see exactly what was happening here. "Understood," he said coolly. "I'll handle it." Karen's smirk deepened. She had won. Another homeowner put in their place. Or so she thought. 3 days later, Oak Ridge Estates held its annual HOA election meeting. Karen sat at the head of the table, sipping her overpriced bottled water and waiting for the usual rubber stamp process. As usual, she expected to be re-elected unopposed. Who else would even try to run against her? The meeting began. Karen was already drafting a new set of petty fines in her head when the HOA secretary, Linda, suddenly cleared her throat nervously. "So, before we move to the vote, we have an unexpected announcement," Linda said. Karen barely looked up until Linda continued. "We, received a new nomination for HOA president." Karen's eyes snapped to attention. "A nomination?" Linda hesitated. "Yes. Derrick Coleman has been nominated and has accepted." A hush fell over the room. Karen laughed, actually laughed. "You're joking." Linda shook her head. "Not at all. Derrick, would you like to say a few words?" Karen turned her head so fast her pearls nearly snapped off. Derrick Coleman stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. "Thank you, Linda," Derrick said, flashing a knowing glance at Karen. "I moved into this neighborhood because I wanted a peaceful place to live. But I quickly learned that peace isn't possible when HOA leadership treats homeowners like intruders in their own community. Karen's face twitched. Derrick continued, I believe in a fair HOA, one that supports its residents instead of constantly fining them for trivial things. I believe in transparency, and most importantly, I believe in accountability. Murmurs rippled through the room. Karen's stomach sank. Derrick smiled. So, if elected, my first act as HOA president will be to review and overturn unnecessary fines and ensure that HOA rules apply to everyone, not just the people Karen personally disapproves of. Karen froze. Linda cleared her throat again. All right, let's proceed to the vote. Karen knew she had a loyal following. People like her. People who understood how things were supposed to work. But when the votes were counted, her heart plummeted. Derrick won. By a landslide. Karen could barely breathe as she watched Derrick take her place at the head of the HOA. The very next day, an emergency HOA meeting was called. Karen sat stiffly in her chair, arms folded tight. She had spent years building this HOA to reflect her vision, and now this man was about to tear it all apart. Derrick leaned forward, fingers laced. First order of business, reviewing HOA fines. Karen flushed. After thorough review, Derrick continued, I've determined that many of these fines were excessive and targeted unfairly. Karen opened her mouth, but Derrick held up a printed-out email, one she had sent. An email full of passive-aggressive complaints about certain residents, coded in language that wasn't subtle at all. Karen blanched. Derrick didn't stop. Additionally, I've received multiple complaints from homeowners about unfair treatment, particularly from the previous HOA president. Karen shot up. This is a witch hunt. Derrick tilted his head. Karen, you fined me $750 for a potted plant. The room went silent. Derrick smirked. Effective immediately, all unjust fines are being revoked, including the one you issued to me. The crowd erupted in applause, but Derrick wasn't done. Oh, and one more thing. HOA rules apply to everyone, so moving forward, that means no more special treatment for the former president. Karen's eyes widened in horror. What does that mean? Derrick flipped to another page. It means that your backyard fence, yes, the one not HOA approved, needs to be taken down within 30 days or face a fine of $500 per week. Karen gasped. You can't do this? Derrick just smiled. Karen, I'm just following the rules. As the meeting ended and homeowners cheered, Karen stormed out, red-faced and humiliated. She had spent years wielding HOA power like a weapon, and now she was the one being held accountable. And Derrick? He never paid that $750 fine. Justice had been served.